Hello, welcome. This is the King's Court, Kinging and Community, part 2 of our His King series. And I am Mara Frazier, the curator of the Dance and Movement collections here at the Jerome Lawrence and Robert E. Lee Theater Research Institute. And I am so excited to welcome you here today. Before I turn this webinar over to Beth Cattleman and our panelists, I wanted to share a little bit with you today about the LGBTQ plus zines and ephemera collection here at Thompson Library Special Collections. The LGBTQ zines and ephemera collection is part of the Thompson Library Rare Books and Manuscripts. It includes personal stories, news, poems, fictional stories, and art by individuals and groups who identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community, particularly in the United States, and ranges approximately 1973 to 2020. Zines, as you may know, are self-published works that are traditionally reproduced by photocopying an original layout, hand assembling and stapling. There are texts, there are images, stapled together, and usually they contain a mix of writing and art. They're created and distributed by individuals and collaborative groups. Zines serve as a platform for creative self-expression. And here we have a page from the original plumbing zine that's part of this collection. It's an article titled Showbiz with Murray Hill. So very popular drag king. And that's just one fun thing in our LGBTQ plus zines and ephemera collection. So Thompson Library Special Collections, as usual, is open for research, and we welcome all here. You can be a member of the university community, you cannot be. So please come on in and check out what we have. If you're particularly interested in the LGBTQ plus zines collection, then please contact Jolie Braun. Her information is right here. To learn more about our theater and dance collections, please contact Beth Cattleman, who will be hosting today. I'm about to turn it over to her, the curator of theater, or myself. So now I'd like to turn the program over to Beth, who will welcome our guests. Welcome to the King's Court, Kinging and Community. And this is going to be a great conversation. So thank you all for being here. Take it away, Beth.
Thanks, Mara. Oh, this is really great to have this conversation. We have an illustrious set of panelists today, and I'm going to turn it over. I want to let you know that I am the curator of the Theater Research Institute here at the Thompson Library. But I'm going to turn it over to each one of our panelists so that they can introduce themselves. So let's start off. Luster, go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and thank you all again for this awesome project that you're doing. My name's Lester Singleton. I am one of the His King's drag, the International Drag King Extravaganza and Fast Friday Productions, which produced all of that fun we had so long ago.
Thanks, Lester. Jen Rose?
Hi there, I'm Jen Rose Fitzgerald, and I met Lester and Julia and Kim through the Women's Studies program at the time at Ohio State, and was one of many people who were very hungry for something different on the scene, which the Kings provided, which involved just a really unique community. And I was also a part of a band called Bitches Brew that was also a part of that scene.
Thanks, Jen Rose. Kim, go ahead.
I'm Kim Swenson. My cat is joining us today as well, too. And
Great.
I was a grad student in the Women's Studies department from 1997 to 1999. And I was lucky enough to meet awesome folks like Lester and Jen Rose and Julie, and had so many fun times at His King shows, at Bitches Brew concerts, and at Jack's. So it's really fun to be here talking about those great days.
And Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave Plunkett. I am Kim's partner, and so I didn't just tag along, but I was introduced to everyone through the Women's Studies Department and Bitches Brew and His Kings through my relationship with her, and met a great community and became one of the unofficial Bitches Brew dancers as part of that. And it was a great experience.
And finally, last but certainly not least, Julia. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks. I'm Julie or Julia Applegate. I use she pronouns, and I was along for the ride for all this stuff. Yeah, all those years ago, helped to found Fast Friday Productions, and you know, I don't know. I guess I'm just a little verklempt right now, so I'll stop there.
That's great. Well, I think I'm going to start with Luster here, because I hear that you probably have the story of kind of the King's Court and how that all came about. Can you give us a little background? Oh, and you're muted, Luster. There you go.
So much of His Kings, honestly, was the right place, the right time, and it organically kind of came together. But we had, I had some friends, as did other Kings who had friends, who always came to our shows. And they would come, some were girlfriends, some were boyfriends, some were just friends, but they would help us set up, tear down. They would follow us when we started going out of town. They would make it like a fun weekend type of thing, and they would go and support us wherever we went. And it started occurring to me that I was always worried about equity. I was always worried about all of the work that folks put into things, and how could we turn this into something sustainable. And so I got the idea that if people, they were kind of like roadies, but I didn't want to just call them roadies. I was like, well, because they would help us, and then we'd always have a table or two for them to sit at. And so I started thinking about them as the court, because there were certain phrases that I would say, and they would always shout back. They just became super fans. And at the height of us, when we had about, I think 14 or 15 Kings, when we went to New York, we took, I believe, 3 vans and 2 cars, something like that. That's how many people we moved en masse to New York City to perform. We were there a whole weekend. And the King Court, they were drivers, they were security sometimes, they were the bank, and would run and do all kinds of errands for us. Sometimes they were stoners, and I don't mean stoners as in marijuana, I mean stoners as in putting jewels on, costumes, anything and everything. And so the court, in my mind, were our royal fans and deserved as much. They always got at least one great table. If I could work out drink tickets, enough drink tickets for them too, I would give that to them. And we'd often pay gas if their cars were used to transport our stuff or us. And it just kind of grew from there. I don't know if there was ever, in my mind, I looked for it. In my mind, there is sort of an official list somewhere, but I could not find it. But they would be able to find their list on their name on the door to come in if they were at the show.
That's great. How about, okay, so the rest of you, how did you get involved with the King's Court? Were you involved with it? How did that work for you? Jump right in. Dave?
Sure. I got involved a little bit later than probably most people. Like by the time I was, participating, you know, His King was a real production. Like I listened to the video about the previous presentation and talking about the origins of His Kings and sort of the humble but yet exciting beginnings. By the time I was there, there was like 14 or so kings, and it was quite a production and quite theatrical and really polished and an incredible experience. So, I mean, really my joining was just being not really a super fan, but just being there, following around, attending all the shows, going to Dragdom, participating in that. You know, wasn't so much being a sort of the official person who would drive people around or go over things, but I was there to do just support and be there help however I could.
Hey, you have to be hype people.
Here we go. Here we go.
So I dug into the archives, i.e. my basement last night. And so I think this is a picture from Dragdom, right? Like, so some moments where His Kings were helping to facilitate like drag within the community.
And so, and we need to let folks know that person in the middle, right?
That was
is
Yeah, that was Dave. Sorry. That
Yep.
was Dave. That was me too. If I'm going back there, that's me. I'm in the
Okay.
green, Dave's in the purple dress. So yeah, I had a lot of fun going in my basement, trying to do a little homework last night and finding some pictures to kind of evoke all of these spaces. I know Jen, I want Jen Rose to have time because I feel like her time might be, I'm going to make this a segue.
Yeah.
There we
Yeah.
go. Yes,
There we
perfect
go.
segue. Jen Rose,
Sort of
who is
started out
that?
with that.
That's awesome.
It sort of started out with that. Our
That's
baby.
awesome. Kelly Cole. That's
Jax,
Helen.
right?
Yeah, that's at Jax, I think.
And it's funny that you mentioned Dragdom, Kim, because was it you that lent me and then ultimately gave me a pair of platform boots? Because I was at that Dragdom and I was dressed as Gene Simmons, I believe. Because I had a hair. I was like, I don't know what to do with it, so I'm going to do the kiss thing. And Kim was like, Jen Rose, if you are going to dress up like that, you can have these platform boots to do that with.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very true.
And so your band was what? Bitches Brew, right?
Bitches Brew, yes.
Now, was the band actually formed before you started getting involved with the His Kings, or did you form it for that?
It all happened at the same time.
Okay.
So I can't say exactly, but we had just formed. We didn't know what we were doing. I mean, it was a lot like the Kings. We were like getting our feet wet and just saying, how can we create something, some community here in this space? Because the scene just wasn't made for us, and we could feel that. You know, everything that was available was, you know, we used to joke, well, either you want sort of techno really geared towards sort of gay men going to the club scene, or you want like an Indigo Girls cover band. And if you don't want one of those two things, there's nothing else for you. And so, and not that there's anything wrong with those things, but it's a range, and there was a lot of other things. And so, that those pictures are bringing it back for me. But my memory is that even from the very beginning, like, we were not good. We didn't know what we were doing. Kelly Cole's amazing, but you know, we were not an experienced band. That's not why people were coming. It was because they were craving that community. And then, you know, we were able to build something, and the Kings just were able to build something so fast. It was stunning how fast, like, it was just fire code right away. You know, you could tell how hungry people were for it because you couldn't get in. And so I didn't even know what the King's Court was, but this idea that, hey, we have a table for you, for people who have been like supportive and, you know, who are helping out and doing things, was an honor to just feel like you were part of something. And that was why you were there in the first place. So I love hearing people who were part of the Kings at the time to talk about their thinking, because from our end, at least from my end, I just thought how amazing that we get to like have front row seats for this cultural moment that is being created here.
Yeah,
they play themselves down. They play themselves down, but they really were the hype people. And maybe, you know, as the MC of the show, maybe that's just my perspective, but I could count on this group of people to always be listening. They often handled situations that might have been going on in a negative way in the, you know, because at first people weren't exactly sure what to do about all of us. The lesbians were a little uncomfortable with the expose on different kinds of sex that was happening amongst women. And so there was some being uncomfortable there. I can't say that our language was always pristine. And we also needed a time to change in between. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, why wouldn't we highlight something else going on in the community? So them playing the opening and playing in the middle was perfect for a show, because isn't that what happens at regular shows that you go to? If you go to a concert, there's usually an opening band, and if there is an intermission, there's another up and coming face there. So it really was in our mind to be like, hey, one of our mottos was, if you don't have fun here, then you don't know how to have fun, because we try to provide something for everybody. You like to dance, stay till the end and dance. You like live music, we got that. You like kinging, okay, let's do that, you know? And so they really were instrumental in leading the crowd into knowing how it was supposed to do and how it was supposed to interact. Jen Rose almost always was the first person to tip me in a lot of the shows to really help people understand what they were supposed to be doing. And Dave, you
That's
know,
a great comment.
after dancing.
That's a great comment as far as like, you know, yes, this kind of like the audience participation and the community and kind of codes of behavior. And yeah, what do you do? Because, you know, once you've been around hanging out in the bars, it's like, oh yeah, okay, we know. But at the time that this community was building, you're right, you know, not necessarily everybody had the concept of what should happen. Julie, let me hear from you a little bit about your recollections of the beginning of the King's Court.
Yeah, I think, you know, I really feel like a lot of that grew around Luster's. You know, Luster was rooted here in Columbus before many of us were, and because of that, had this big network. I mean, by the time we started His Kings and all this stuff, I had been in Columbus, I think 3 years, and I had a good network as well, but a lot of that network was the same network that Luster had. And I think for me, one of the things that I learned most from being around Luster was, I mean, it fit in with kind of how I am. I really love history, and history is really important to me to, you know, think about who went before me and what groundwork was laid for the ground I walk on. And Luster had the knowledge of the queer history. I didn't know that history. I knew Appalachian history, or I knew Ohio history, the history that you read in elementary school or middle school. But to come into Columbus as a young person coming out and meet someone who was 10 years older than me and very rooted in this community and straddled the white queer community and the people of color queer community, and was just always reminding us there are, you know, what we're doing is new and exciting, but it's not brand new. It's a new iteration of women impersonating men in a queer environment. And we have to, like, you know, think about the people that went before us, and we have to build community. And so I mean, I think when I think about the King's Court, I think, of course, about Jen Rose and Dave and Kim and Megan and all those people who came along with us in that trip to New York City and all that stuff. But I really think, the cornerstone of that was Luster really just being in who they are, in saying, this is not something we do alone. You know, it's not just the performers, it's all of the support people. And we created also something that I think that helped expand the court. Kim shared the picture of her and Dave in drag. The Dragdom events were just another extension of the court, I think. People who felt most comfortable, like taking that step from in the audience to on the stage, a lot of them were our King's Court people.
Yeah.
And that,
So what was the Dragdom? Can you tell us a little bit more about the Dragdom events?
Sure, yeah. The idea was that drag was for everybody. And we had, after we were a year into this thing, we carried all these people who wanted to perform, and we were getting to the point where
There we go.
we had a core, exactly. We had a core of people who wanted to perform repeatedly, but then there were people who just wanted to play, right? And so we just combined the word kingdom with drag and came up with this domain of drag. And the idea was that we'll provide the venue, we'll provide the stage, you come with your music and your moves and sign up. We had a sign up sheet. It's just kind of like an open mic, but for drag. And it just blew up.
It did. It really did. It's one of the best things we've ever done, really, is drag them. And it continues to be. A few times that I've done it since, people are thirsty for that space. And their friends are thirsty to see them really get the opportunity to, and there was no judgment. We worked really hard on accepting whatever the music was that you decided to bring along. I mean, if it was big band, then I was going to do my best to get people and help encourage people to support that person in their big band move. And you might turn around and it was going to be some backwater banjo picking number. And we're going to support it in the same way. We really wanted to show that all of these things could work together. We could celebrate all of us together in that space. And for me, it took I just knew you have to involve the audience, and the audience has to feel a part of what you're doing. It was just extremely important to me that we weren't just there to take people's money, that we weren't just there for that. That part was good. Obviously, who knows where we would be if that was all we were thinking about, but that it was just really important that our audience knew how humble we felt with their participation. I mean, it was their dollars that helped us scrape through to pay off part of Julie or Heidi's credit cards to, try and help us, and still have in mind that, for a predominantly female-born, female-identified crowd, that money is hard earned, and that a lot of decisions have to be made around that money. So we need to give them everything we can give them, and that is an awesome sense of self and a place to suspend disbelief for a moment that they could live their life, and we live their life. We go along with the fantasy with them, and it just worked out. And whenever we said something was to dress up, you could count on the court to do it all the way.
That's
there was no doubt. There was no doubt they were going to do it come all the way prepared.
Lester,
So,
can I build
Jim?
on a story from that?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, to pop in there. Go ahead.
I was going to talk about the Valentine's Day show that you did, and it was so phenomenal. It was so beautiful. I remember Smyra's performance so well there. But Dave and I went with Andrea, and Andrea's not super fancy, but she got really fancy to go to that show. And I can just remember she was floating on air after the show and talking about how great life felt for her and how beautiful she felt. So just like that whole ethos of trying to give your audience that sense of self-empowerment and self-affirmation. I like that story was just flashing in front of my brain. We had such a beautiful night.
Let me ask Kim and Dave here. Do you remember the first time you did drag?
So I don't think we ever performed.
Okay, you just dressed up.
That's not exactly true. At Dragdom, we got up and sang.
Did we?
Yeah,
really?
you did.
I know I'm very bad. I'm very bad singer. Yes, we did.
Tell that story. I don't know that story.
I wore a dragon before, but I think every time first time I was ever in really public and performed anyway was at Dragon. I think it's the first and only time.
Yeah, I remember that. You all did.
What did we
Very well.
perform?
I do not remember what we performed.
I can't remember. I'm not sure you were as excited as Dave.
I can tell you that at a Dragdom that we did when we formed IDKE, which we'll talk about in the next webinar series, we had Dragdoms were part of that event as well. And I had just met my partner, who I've now been with for 20 years at, I think it was the second or third IDKE. Anyway, her mother came to town, and her mother and my now wife did a number together at Dragdom. So like,
Oh yeah.
my mother-in-law did a number. I mean, it was,
Wow.
and we had children. Remember, we had children who did numbers.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really was all inclusive, like break down the barrier between who can perform and who doesn't. And, you know, we were like, it was all about drag is for everybody.
Yeah.
It's so important too. I mean, you were so instrumental in building community, bringing people together, you know, as I think Lester said, bolstering kind of folks, you know, in their sense of self. I mean, it's really, you know, it's what those performances, theater can do, all of that. And you guys, you know, you all did it. I mean, you did it for yourselves and for the community, which is fantastic. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the New York trip and kind of memories from that, or how did that come about? Who decided, or how did you get that connection?
Oh, I can talk. So I was kind
Yeah.
of serving as our DJ and producer, I think. You know, we had multiple producers, but I
You
really
were doing
like,
that part though.
yeah, I really like to travel. And so, you know, I didn't have any musical talent. And if I had, maybe I would have been in a band that traveled, but we were really approaching our success with this perspective of bands travel. Why can't we travel? And so we just started traveling. And the more that we traveled, we started out with a small circle. We went to Louisville, Kentucky. We went to Akron, Ohio. We went to Dayton, and our circle just kept getting bigger. And we wanted to go to New York. So we just sent an email to Meow Mix in New York.
Okay.
I mean, that's a legendary club.
Yep.
And it's about as big as the room I'm sitting in. It's tiny. But it was like, we were just like, we're going, why not? You know, we sent letters to Michigan Women's Festival. We'll go anywhere. So Meow Mix wrote us back and said, yeah, come for 2 nights. And so we just started planning. And again, Lester being, you know, so community oriented, you know, immediately out comes the sign-up sheet. Who wants to go to New York with us? You know, in fact,
Well, we needed drivers.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I have to say, I will step back just a minute, because again, one of the reasons I got to know Lester so quickly was because Lester was always planning things. And I went to New York City for the 25th anniversary of Stonewall because Lester was doing that, you know. They were like, all right, well, this is the huge, you know, anniversary of this major event. And so I want to go, and I know my friends want to go, so sign up. And sure enough, I signed up, and off we went to New York in 1990, whatever year that was. Must have been 94. And so again, a few years later, Lester's, who's going to New York City? And so 4 vans. I'm pretty sure we had 4 vans and probably some other vehicles.
My goodness. Now, Dave and Kim, did you go to that trip? No. Okay. That sounds like so you had like a whole bunch of drag kings and the court, and then you did a show there at Meow Mix.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we
Did
did. We did at least 2 shows.
Okay.
Didn't we? I feel like we did an early show and a late show, and then we did that 2 nights in a row or something like that. It was.
I think
a lot.
Lester's just coming back on.
Okay.
Is that
So-
you, Lester?
Muted.
We lost Lester for a minute.
We lost
Yeah,
Lester for a minute. Yeah, we got to rename Lester again. So,
It dropped for some reason.
yeah, we were just talking about the New York trip and kind of how that all came about. And I was wondering about what kind of show you did there, if, any memories that you have from
We,
that.
well, I do remember when we decided to do this. Julie did like get us the gig, but Julie and I were the adventurous ones out of the two, out of the four of us, or five of us. And so it took a bit of convincing, because people are like, how are we going to get folks there? And I was like, oh, we have to have drivers because people are going to be tired and they're going to have to be working on their costumes and whatnot. So it would be, I also had been, I was older than them. So I had experienced a few things that they had not. And I had a sense that we needed to bring a few people with us to help us cheer on, because New York is tough. It is tough and it is cutthroat. And I just knew my parents, my family does a big family reunion. Almost 700 people come, and my parents are, my father's the founder of that. And we go to a different state. We go between 4 states every 4 years. Like every 4 years it's here and then it's in other places. So I'd had experience moving that many people. And so I had in my mind, I knew what we needed to be able to do it. And so that's why, and I knew that folks for the King's Court would of course want to come. So we all need to be able to do it the most economical way. And so, why not rent vans, plus there weren't
Yep.
very many of us that were over 25 that could be allowed to drive the van.
Right. Yeah, got to be old enough and have a credit card, right?
Were old and that they could drive. And then we went up there and we knocked it out of the park, so much so that the New York Kings got a little in their feelings because we packed the house. And that is no lie.
That's great. Oh, what have you got? Oh.
We packed the house, and now when I think about it, it blows my mind. I mean, it like blows my mind to do parking, figured out how to, and keep them. Oh yeah.
Sorry, but that's the
Oh,
flyer,
that's
and
really
then
cool.
there was an
Yeah.
article.
Yeah. So can you
So
you
cool.
see that? Yeah. Oh, this is great, Julie. Oh my goodness. That's wonderful. Wow.
That is so funny.
Wow,
That
wow,
is.
wow. That is fantastic.
We one time put, how many people did we take we put them on a plane and we went to, was it Wisconsin or Minneapolis or something? We got on the plane, a whole bunch of us. It was around Halloween time. And we took a Halloween show to some college, and they paid to fly us all there and to put us up and feed us and pay us for the show and fly us home.
Nice. Yeah, that's great stuff. Yeah.
And there were 4 people who went with us.
So Kim and Dave, let me ask you, because you were regulars, right, at the shows. Can you share with us just a couple of the standout performances or moments or craziness that happened that stick in your mind?
There are so many performers, so it's difficult to conjure. And like, I feel like if I name someone, there'll be so many folks that I'm leaving out.
No.
But-
Can I jump
but
in? Because you have a better memory than me, so then
Oh, you don't want me to steal yours? Okay, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I mean, I mean, honestly, like I said, by the time I was really involved, the performances were, at least from my perspective, very polished and really just amazing. But I have to say, what stands out to me, and I cannot hear the Backstreet Boys without thinking of His Kings and just that whole ensemble forwards, the choreographing, and just the energy and the excitement. It was just they did that more than once. It wasn't like one show, but that
was Baby T.
Yeah.
Maxwell.
Yeah. And
And
then, so that definitely stands out.
oh, David.
So that was a group number that you remember? Yeah.
So I'm old and my memory is addled too. So it's harder for me to remember people's performance names. So I'm so sorry. But when Christy Wisman did You Can't Even Save Yourself and erected a cross.
Oh, yeah.
Was that at Wall Street? I feel like it wasn't even Jack's. I feel like it might have been Wall Street. It might have been a bigger space, but maybe it just made Jack's feel larger than life. Like I can remember like the hair on the back of my neck kind of picking up. It was so just visceral and moving, and
Mother Mary was black.
Yeah. Kind of taking on in a very iconoclastic way and in a very empowering way these ideas in a pop culture song and reframing them so powerfully.
That's right. Oh, and then what Julie, go ahead. And what are you saying? We took the cross to Chicago?
Yeah, so we did. So at some point, because as Dave is saying, we got very polished and we knew that our audience, well, anyone who lives in Ohio knows that Ohio is a mix of all kinds of people. And we had the most progressive queers in the audience, and we had some queers who were like, they're gay at home, but it's like they're kind of real mainstream. Maybe they're religious, maybe they're Republican. I don't know. But we started writing, well, I guess they'd now be called trigger warnings, but we wrote disclaimers and we would put them on the tables and tell people, when you're here, what you're going to see is, any representations of sex are consensual, any representations of bondage or BDSM, that's all consensual. We wanted people to understand that everything we were doing was an intentional and consensual and critique on patriarchy and racism and all this stuff. And so anyway, in Christianity. And so, boy, the disclaimers went out that night that Christy did her number. But she's a carpenter. She's incredible. She built a full-size cross. She put herself on the cross. She looked like Jesus. I mean, it was an unbelievably polished, incredible number. And then we went to Chicago. We took the cross with us to Chicago. She did the number in Chicago at this bar called Berlin. And then, by then the cross was kind of damaged. And so she left it in Boys Town after the show on the corner of a street at 3:30 in the morning. And we drove back to Columbus. It's just, that's the kind of stuff that we did, where you think about it now and you're like, oh my God, we were so bold, and it was amazing.
The devil came out. Remember who did a devil, like fully like devil with the bullhorns and breathing fire. That was the number. I mean, and those two numbers created a lot of tension within the group. We had to talk out a lot, because we of course had people like down with God because of the whole homophobia. And then we had people like, wait a minute now, I go to church every Sunday and I don't know what you're trying to say with this number. And we really had to work it out as to whether or not how we were going to do the number. Wasn't necessarily whether or not we could do it, but how were we going to do it, and what were we going to say about it, and how were we going to stand behind what we did. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was shaking in my boots. I knew that the ceiling was going to open up and a huge bolt of lightning was going to come in there and fry all of it. I really did believe that. And that didn't happen. But I did have a lot of conversations about that number, and I would still choose to do the same thing, but I was terrified.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of either pushback or mistakes. We all know doing theater, mistakes happen, perhaps. I think the last time somebody Lester, I can't remember if it was you said they fell off the stage. Somebody fell off the stage and then they just got right back up. Do you recall any kind of snafus?
It was David, right? We had
Oh.
been asking, we were at Wall Street and their stage is really high. And we had been asking for better markings on the stage. And because when the lights get to flashing and all of that, and he was performing and he was standing there, and then all of a sudden he wasn't standing there and he hit the ground so hard you heard the slap. And there was like this pause, and then he just popped back up and started performing, you know, like the rest of the number, and went on with the show. But
Was he all right?
He didn't feel so great for a few days afterwards, but he didn't.
Yeah.
I don't think he ended up having to go in or anything like that. I mean, we've learned a lot about wetness and stickiness on the stage. You know, a lot about that. It got to the place people would get so frenzied that, and they're chipping. You know, we learned a lot about when and where inappropriate touching goes, and it's not just cis men that do that. And so we had to finally get to a place where we had security. We had a couple King's Court people that would have to do security because people would get carried away and think that they could grab at us and stick their hands places where they were not invited to do that. And, you know, we had to have some people escorted out because of their behavior.
Yeah.
We learned a lot around drinking. We had to, you know, make sure that I was making some announcements from the stage, like have a good time, but let's not get carried away. That's not an excuse for the bad behavior, you know? And so, you know, we had some situations like that. We got pushback from what I would say second wave feminism, for some staunch supporters of second feminism, you know, actually told that what we were doing were detrimental to women and feminist movement. And we just sort of kind of moved through that. And we were also arrogant graduate students. You're not going to tell us we're bringing a new wave. You know, people like, whatever, we're tired of your comfortable shoes. You know, we're not, you wear those, we're going to wear, I mean, you know, I'm not trying to be mean to anybody, but that is what our fire was. We couldn't see ourselves in our community. We couldn't see ourselves. And so, you know, it's like, well, damn it, I like club music and I like dancing to this and that. And I like different kinds of acoustic music. You know, I need a little more than just that guitar now. I need just a little bit more. That's okay. You know that. But, you know, we also, Julie and I had lots of conversations. We are mad that gay men own kitsch. And we were tired of that. We were sick and tired of that. And we knew ourselves to be some pretty kitschy people. And we decided to go after it.
Well, and you really did. That's fantastic. Well, let's talk a little bit, going off of that, about kitsch or costuming in particular. So I'm guessing that a lot of thrift storing happened. Was anybody making costumes? Were everybody helping each other with costumes? How was that working?
Thrift stores.
Yeah,
100%.
everybody.
Yep. Thrift stores.
All thrifting. That was before people were running around saying what repurposing and whatever, going to the thrift store and finding things. My favorite place to shop was Lowe's, though. I like to take non-traditional materials and turn them into costumes.
I love that.
I did learn that copper sheeting should be curled on its end. Because otherwise, at the end of the night, you will be cut.
Oh,
all over the
yikes.
place.
Oh,
From your 100+ copper squares slashing across your skin. But it was
oh,
worth it. Was
yikes.
worth it.
So, and
I
Dave,
mean,
where
we
did
use
you get your drag costumes?
your wife's closet.
Yeah, that would be the person with the windows behind her primarily. I don't know where
Okay.
I stretched them a bit, I think.
I think Dave might be the only person who ever got to wear that dress. He put some runs in it that night. And
Ah.
what's great is your mom bought me that dress, Dave.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you were actually giving up your wardrobe.
And I believe this is the suit you wore when we got married. Like I'm wearing
Yeah,
the
right.
suit
She
you
wore
wore
my
when we
suit.
got
That's
married.
right.
Oh, I love that so much. That's so
Can I
cute.
pivot? There's something that I want to make sure that we have time to talk about.
Yeah,
Because
please.
If I think about kind of how I might fit in any way here, I really think about community, and I think about how my friendship circle was enlarged, because I was friends with a bunch of academics who were doing some really cool performance art and exploration. And then I got to meet a lot of other really beautiful, interesting people. So like I have more pictures, but like these are pictures of just like Sunday brunch. So maybe, maybe we did shows. We went to some shows over the weekend, right? I think that's Ocean. It was Ocean, Samira's niece, maybe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and you can see
She just
that
had her
that's
own little
Shawnee in the
baby.
background, and Alice. I think maybe we're at, I don't know whose house we're at, but so I was just thinking about that kind of level of community as well, and that extension. And then we were joking a little bit earlier about how, like Donna Balladad, Baby T, and I talk about kid stuff and soccer, and her son is now at a school that my kids went to. So we had long conversations about that. Or if I still printed out pictures, right? I probably have digital pictures of brunches with Julie's family and my family and Donna's family, and getting folks together, or going to Chicago to see Allison and Nicole, or Lester and I were parents at the same elementary school together. So our lives continue to intersect in some just beautiful, wonderful ways, in terms of like how that foundation that you all gave to us by bringing different kinds of people together has extended across the decades.
That's amazing. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. So you have kids. Do you see them exploring in these same ways, or is there anything comparable? Have times changed enough now that we're all great with gender and we just do our thing? Or any thoughts about that you might see reflected in your children?
I can jump in here. I mean, I can tell you that when we were choosing a institution for them to go to at age 3, my only question, and I should say we had financial resources to be able to afford a daycare. So I wasn't concerned that the daycare wouldn't be able to feed my kids or something. So all of those things were in place, all of that regular things you'd expect. But I was really most concerned about how the daycare handled gender. And, I said, like, my kids, I want to know that if my boy wants to walk around in some high heels or play with a doll, that's not going to be a problem. And same goes for our girl, that if she wants to do all the boy things, that no one's going to have an issue with that. And if anyone does, then the teachers are going to redirect the children who are already at that young age learning rules about gender and negative consequences. And so, that stuff came up, but I feel like where it may be different is that our daycare was cognizant of that. It took me courage to ask that question, but they had an answer because they were thinking about that. And I feel like, the kids themselves are still being policed in their circles. That happens. I'm sure others can say that too, but that is still happening. But I would say that the parent or there are institutions and teachers and administrators and all that who are trying to undo some of that and keep it safer for the kids who do want to explore.
Mhm.
Turns out my kids look like they're not going to be gender queer, which is, I would have been happy if they were, but it never works out that way. So, but they've at least had safe spaces to do that.
Sure, yeah. Great. Anybody else pop in?
I think like Julie, I thought the same thing about my own children, but recently my son came out as trans and at a fairly late age, and he's still asking me to use he pronouns, but that's not the direction he seems to be moving in. So I think it was interesting for us kind of feeling like we tried to create spaces and put our kids in situations where they had some freedom, some space to explore. They weren't constrained, maybe. I mean, they're still constrained by culture, right? We know that exists. I think that some of that is happening in the chat right now. But it was no panacea for our kids' journey, certainly.
Mhm.
And we're still on it. So I'll report back.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting, and you think about kind of the internet and how things are playing out, and it's like, are we building the same kind of communities? Is it splintering? How is that all affecting the generation coming up? And we don't really know yet, but I think it's an interesting thing. And we talk about what you all were doing, and the space was so important, right? I think we talked about that in our last one, that being in that space, in that physical space, and now we've got all these challenges. So it's just very interesting to me how that affects performance and community and all of that interchange. It looks like we've got about 5 minutes. So I want to throw out there, is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to say or make sure that we cover, or memories that you'd like to share to have them recorded for posterity here?
I'll jump in and just piggyback both what's something that's been said today and I heard in the previous interviews, this whole idea of being inclusive in community. And I mean, as a cis white male, in some ways, I would, in theory, would be on the outskirts, but I never felt that way. And it was a big part of it was entertainment and fun and open to everyone. I still have, it's probably 20 years old and barely fits, but I have my His King Pure Fun t-shirt from 20, 25 years ago, and I still have it. I think the last time I tried to put it on, it probably wouldn't be pretty, but I just, even all these years around, I feel like it was, I still feel part of the community, and I don't know where I would be without that experience.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. Any other final thoughts? Oh, questions? Where can we get one of these 100% Pure Pun t-shirts? Audience wants merch.
Hey, when we get our exhibit at OSU, we'll do reprints of all these
Hey,
things.
that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we've got the design, so.
I love it.
Yeah, some of the best t-shirts. We really do. I have to say. I just am really, it was always my desire that people just had the most fun. We were just surrounded by so much bad, just so many people saying that what the queers did were not good. And I'm just really happy that we were able to provide something brings like really great feelings to people even now. You rarely see anybody saying something about His King where they don't just get a smile on their face and they're not. And that was the greatest part for me, was just looking out into the sea of people and seeing them just literally be so filled with joy and happiness, and knowing that the next day they woke up like, damn, that was fun.
Yep.
That was really, really fun. And I just feel extremely blessed that I got to be one of the people who did that for folks, you know, and that somewhere, some kid who feels lost is going to stumble across this and feel better knowing that if it was possible in the olden days, it's possible now. And that just, you know, makes me feel awesome.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, I think on that, we're going to bring this session to an end. I do want to remind everyone that we've got another session, another webinar that's going to be on the IDKE King's Extravaganza, and that's going to take place on November 9th, I believe, and also at 3:00 Eastern Standard Time. You'll probably maybe see some of these folks back. Before we let you go, I really, really want to thank you all. And Julie, you've got something you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one other thing that came to mind for me. And this is, again, you know, I think it's important to just talk about the ways that we were, and again, I'm going to point this back to Lester because I think a lot of this was just tied to their personality. The King's Court, like, it grew, it expanded and contracted, and it changed constantly. And it was doing that because we encountered people who had new skills or new, you know, or people moved on. Maybe someone finished graduate school and the person who was our security guard left. So we didn't have a security guard for a little while, but then we met someone new who knew how to sew. And then we had a seamstress. And I think it was just a constant ebb and flow because we were all outsiders, and we didn't want to make anyone else feel like they were an outsider. We were constantly like expanding our umbrella to make the people who were drawn to us feel welcome and included. And that's like strengths-based kind of work before people were talking about it that way, you know, and it was special. And I think it's why we were popular, because we made so much space.
Yep, and you've left quite a legacy. I can tell just from the responses that we're, you know, getting of folks who are watching the webinars and the folks who are kind enough to come on and share their stories with us. Really something special here in the Midwest, which, you know, they call us the flyover states, but there's great stuff that's been happening here for decades. So again, thank you all so much. I look forward to our next session, and let's start planning on that exhibit.
Yeah.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Uh,
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.